Roadster running on late. They're at the top of the stretch, and Omaha Beach, Manny Wah putting in a stellar effort along the inside. Roadster finishing nicely as well, but it's all about Omaha Beach as they come to the 16th pole. What a classy individual Omaha Beach is, and he is going to gallop home as Santa Anita Park salutes the living legend, Mike Smith, the all-time leader.
All right, welcome back to the Racing Rundown podcast, emergency episode. Pegasus World Cup is this weekend. If you are unaware of what has gone on in the past couple of hours, two of the top horses in the Pegasus World Cup, Spun to Run and Omaha Beach, have scratched out of the race. This obviously changes a lot of stuff. We had put out our Pegasus World Cup preview video. I put that out this morning, and within 5 hours that video is extremely outdated. So we're not alone, though. We got the man who broke this story on Omaha Beach, Jay Privman, on the show right now. So without further ado, let's get into that. So here he is once again. This guy's basically Woj of horse racing. So we appreciate the short notice. Just inform anyone with both the horses that unfortunately had to scratch today, for anyone that's unaware, what the situation was with that.
Right. So what happened, Jack, was early this morning, I talked to the trainer of Spun to Run, Juan Carlos Guerrero, and he had said that the horse had developed some skin disease, and it was pretty much all over his body, and he just didn't feel comfortable running the horse under those conditions. It was just better to try and treat him and get that stuff cleared up. So he came out, but that was just a warm-up for what transpired a little bit later in the day when Richard Mandela said that Omaha Beach was going to scratch, and this was supposed to be his final start anyway, so he's done now. But what happened was he went out for a gallop this morning, and he looked fine, but while he was cooling out later, they noticed a little bit of a problem with his right hind that they just wanted to see if there was an issue there, and they took x-rays, and there was enough of a shadow on there where they're not sure he's getting a fracture, but it might be the beginning of a fracture, and regardless, when you see something like that, you can't take a chance. So he's done. And so basically 24 hours after they drew the Pegasus with 12 horses, it's now down to 10.
And, that's the one thing I want to say. Everyone's going to be disappointed by this, and rightfully so, but before we get into all the analysis on how this affects the race and everything, it is important that we caught it in time, and that, number one, the horse is being taken care of. So that is definitely worth mentioning. Of course, it's disappointing for us. I've been seeing it go around Omaha, the what could have been story with Omaha Beach. This was a really talented horse, and unfortunately, we never got to see him put together that signature win. But getting into the actual race, with regards to Spun to Run, one of the horses that had some speed in that, how does the fact of him not being there affect the race?
Well, it's significant because he would have been one of the pace setters in the race, and because there's now two scratches, it allows Boat Express, who's was originally in post 12, he's now going to move in a couple of spots, and he's very fast, and it'll help him in his attempt to get over from an outside post position. So I think he would be the speed, but Mucho Gusto should be among those forwardly placed as well. So I think you'll see still a pretty legitimate pace in the race, but obviously Spun to Run was a significant part of the original expected pace.
There are a couple of deep closers in this race, and I know people tend to not like deep closers at Gulfstream. Does the fact that there might be a little bit less of a pace, not saying that there's not going to be, but the fact that there's a little bit less of a pace in this race, does that kind of make it a little bit harder for horses, say, like Seeking the Soul or War Story, those horses that come from way out of it normally? Does that affect them?
I mean, that's hard to say in advance of Saturday because you don't really know how the track's going to play. I mean, in the case of the two horses that you just mentioned, Seeking the Soul just seems like he's off form right now. He hasn't run a good race in his last four starts, and it just seems like all of his best races have been at Churchill Downs. Even though he was runner-up in this race last year, he just doesn't look like he's the same horse right now. So I don't know if the way the track's playing is going to matter more than it is that he's just not in good form. at the moment. As far as War Story goes, he got a nice setup last time and reached back with one of his good efforts. He obviously likes this track. I don't know if he's necessarily pace dependent. I think what is more significant for him is that this is a better quality of horses at the top, like with higher power, for instance, than what he beat last time out here at Gulfstream.
Now, how does this benefit the other horses like Higher Power and Mucho Gusto, who are kind of sitting behind Omaha Beach and Spun to Run, the two real buzz horses for this race? Does that benefit them a lot?
Well, certainly. I mean, they're probably going to be the top two choices now in the race when they would have been maybe the third and fourth choices in the race prior. The two major players are now out. Higher Power, the thing that has been his Achilles heel is if he breaks poorly, and he's got to get out of the gate well. But I think if he breaks well, he's the most likely winner of the race. He's trained great at Santa Anita. I thought he had a big chance even before these scratches, and obviously his chances have improved a lot owing to the defections of Spun to Run and Omaha Beach.
Now, how would you say that this would benefit Mucho Gusto? Because obviously, the Oklahoma Derby aside, looking back at his past two starts prior to the Oklahoma Derby, he ran really good third and second, respectively, in the Travers and the Haskell. He looked to be a really solid 3-year-old toward the end, now a 4-year-old, and he doesn't have to go up against one of the top horses of his crop, Omaha Beach, and another Spun to Run Breeders' Cup winner. Does that give Mucho Gusto and the Bob Baffert camp a little bit more confidence going into going into Saturday?
Yeah, I think it helps his chances similarly to, like we were saying, with Higher Power, and that two tough horses for him to go up against are now out of the race. As you mentioned, he had a couple of real promising races last year. I thought his best race was when he ran second in the Haskell behind Maximum Security. He's fresh. He hasn't run in nearly 4 months. He's trained very well at Santa Anita, and he's now owned by Saudi Arabian interests. So I think the plan is assuming he runs a good enough race on Saturday, to then go on to the Saudi Cup.
Gut feeling right now, who goes off the favorite now that Omaha Beach and Spun to Run are gone?
Higher Power.
All right, and just while we have you on here for a couple minutes, looking at the Pegasus turf, no defections in that up to this point. You still, a couple weeks ago, you were on Mo Forza. You still like Mo Forza a lot going into this weekend?
Yeah, I think he's the horse to beat. It's a more wide open race, but I just think his recent form is terrific, and I just think he's continuing to improve. So he would be the one that I'd prefer in that race at the moment.
All right, so loaded Thursday, and we haven't even gotten to the Eclipse Awards yet, and there's already been a ton of stories today, so a big Thursday, lots to keep an eye on. Once again, thanks for the short notice, Jay. Have fun at the Eclipse Awards tonight.
Thanks, Jack. Happy to do it.
Yeah.
Homeward bound in the big one, and it's Higher Power in full flight for the wire. He's opened up to lead by 2.5. Draft picked as chasing gaily. Mongolian Grooms run a huge one, but not quite good enough to win it. It's Higher Power striding home in the TVG Pacific Classic. Basically, he never gave them a chance. Higher Power and Flavion Pratt win well. Draft pick second. Mongolian Groom a great third. Then came Tenfold Campaign running on late. Behind that was